Hey everyone.
Hey guys.
Welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor video. We're actually an hour late today. We didn't realize that it's daylight savings time in the United States. In Mexico, apparently daylight savings time is not till next month. So we were 1 hour behind up until today, and now apparently we're 2 hours behind. But anyway, tonight we're going to be talking about contract extensions. This is something we get a lot of questions about. I thought we'd made a video about this in the past, but apparently we hadn't. So we're going to go over why you might want to extend the contract, as well as some of the things you can negotiate in a contract if you do extend, and as well as people ask a lot about bonuses or increased pay for an extension. So we're going to talk about all those things. So Whitney's going to introduce us, and I'm going to get this video shared in a couple different groups.
All right. Hey everybody. I'm Whitney Aiken.
And I'm Jared Kazazza.
And we're with Traveling Doctors of Physical Therapy. Many of you guys may have tuned in the past for our videos. We're the faces behind Travel Therapy Mentor. And for those of you guys that may not know, we are traveling in Mexico right now. We're not traveling for work. We get that question a lot. We're not working as traveling PTs in Mexico. We're just traveling for fun. We work online on our online business when we're out of the country traveling for fun. So we've been in Mexico for about 6 weeks now, and we are on the west coast of Mexico in Puerto Vallarta. And as Jared mentioned, we had no idea that the time had changed in the US today. So sorry about that if that messed up any of y'all's schedules. I'm sure that's confusing for some of you when you move around the country, when you're different places. Like for example, I think in Arizona, they don't change the time, and so that makes it a little bit different. So yeah, sorry about the time mix up today. If you guys are tuning in with us live, we'd love if you'd say hello. I know some of you guys watch with us live. Some of you guys like to watch our Facebook videos later on the replay, or you like to listen later on our podcast. But if you are watching live, we'd love if you'd say hello in the comments. Give us a thumbs up on the video. Let us know that you're watching. We want to know, are you a current travel therapist? Are you someone who's thinking about getting into travel therapy? We'd love to know who our audience is. Hi, Nick. Thanks for joining. Hey, Brian. Hey, Austin. Hello, other Nick. Thanks for joining. Hi, Armand. Hi, Lauren. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. So just a couple quick announcements before we jump into tonight's topic. As we mentioned, we are in Mexico. We've got another 2 weeks left in Mexico. So it's been a really fun time. When we get back in the US, we will do a video kind of recapping our experience with traveling outside the country during COVID, let you guys know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the time here has really flown by. I mean, we've been here almost 6 weeks already. It really does not seem like that. So most likely we will go back to the United States, stay for a few weeks, and then try to go out on another trip, but we'll just have to see what's going on at that point.
Absolutely. Hey Aaron, hey Megan, hey Courtney, thanks for joining. In addition to traveling in Mexico right now and a little bit about that, we also want to remind you guys that we just released our new travel therapy course. It's an online course that we released about 2 weeks ago now, and we're so excited for our inaugural group of students to join us in our travel therapy course. They are going through the course now. We are working on our mentorship through our private mentorship Facebook group. In the coming weeks, we will be setting up private one-on-one mentorship calls with our members of our group. So we're super excited. If you are interested in getting started with travel therapy, our course is titled Becoming a Financially Successful Travel Therapist, and we've included, there's 12 hours of material in there in addition to some other resources, but we've also included tons of that as financial information on teaching you guys how to be financially successful as travelers. So we're really excited about the course. We're super pumped for those that have already joined in on the course, and we hope that more of you guys will join in the future.
All right, so talking about contract extensions, we are big advocates of extending contracts. We have extended a lot of our contracts in the past, and there's a few reasons why we think it's probably a good idea for you to extend a contract, as long as it's a situation that you're pretty comfortable with, that you like the area. One big reason is that it means less downtime. Almost always when a traveler is changing contracts, they're going from one area to another area. Very rarely are you within a few hours of your prior contract, and that means that you probably have to take a week off of work to move from one area to another. Us in the past, we have done very long moves, like 12+ hour moves in a weekend, but most people will not do that, and it's probably not a smart thing to do, honestly, either. If we could go back, we probably wouldn't have done that, because it really rushed us, and it put us in a situation where if something bad popped up, or we had car troubles or something like that, we would have been in really rough shape. So probably not the smartest thing to do. So that means when you're changing contracts, there's an opportunity cost with the time off. Whereas if you extend a contract, you can go back to back right into the next contract, and you might have 6 months or 9 full months of work without any time off, where you can save a lot of money. So that is a big reason why you might want to extend.
Yeah, it really depends on your priorities as a traveler. We know there's a lot of people that get into travel therapy that they only plan on doing it for maybe a couple contracts, maybe a year, 2 years tops. And their main priority might be just seeing as many places as possible. So for those people, they don't want to spend more than 13 weeks in one place, and we get that. But there are some pros to doing this. Like Jared mentioned, it definitely can decrease your downtime between contracts, which Jared mentioned opportunity cost means you're not going to lose money on that downtime. So it's definitely a way that you can become more financially successful and have consistency in your work schedule. It can also give you consistency in work when there's a difficult job market like we've had recently. This past year, the job market has been really poorly impacted by COVID, and there's a lot of people that when one contract finished, they really weren't able to find another contract. So we encourage a lot of people this past year and continuing into 2021, if you have the opportunity to extend a little longer, that means more job security in a time of uncertainty.
Yeah, so that's another big reason. If you can extend and you know that you have this job already, that's a great thing. Another reason you might want to extend, one of the hard parts about travel is finding housing and getting acquainted with the new clinic, new documentation system, new patients. If you extend a contract, you get to completely avoid those things. Obviously, there are some great parts about going to a new assignment. We love going to new assignments, meeting new people, all of that. But there is something really nice about staying somewhere longer where you're already familiar, and you don't have to. Maybe you do just 2 contracts a year, so you do 6 months at one clinic and 6 months at another clinic, and you're not moving and having to change and adjust every 3 months. There's something nice about that familiarity.
Yeah, that moving part can be pretty tricky. It's also kind of nice once you have your initial 13 weeks and you're already trained at a clinic. 13 weeks goes by so quick, and you sometimes feel like you just sort of got your feet, got your feet wet. You just sort of were getting in your groove as far as the clinic goes, and now it's time to leave. And same thing with exploring the area. We often found that 13 weeks was a really short time to explore and do everything that we wanted to do. We would come up with the end of 13 weeks thinking, there were so many things we wanted to see here that we didn't get to do. So there's a lot of pros and a lot of reasons why you might choose to extend. And there's a lot of reasons why a facility might want you to extend. People want to know, is this common? It's actually quite common. Very often there's a lot of facilities that just have trouble maintaining staff. Of course, you get those opportunities where it's only a defined period where they say, we definitely only need you for these 13 weeks, maybe to cover a maternity or paternity leave or something like that. But there's quite often where the facility just doesn't have somebody, consistent employment back to back to back. And so they might say, you can stay here a little longer. We haven't filled this permanent position. And actually quite often travel contracts will ask you to stay on permanent. That happens to us. We've been asked to stay permanent quite often at jobs. There's been many opportunities where they asked us if we would want to become permanent there. So we'll talk a little bit about, if the facility is the one that's approaching you to stay longer, how do you go about negotiating and how might that change things? But it definitely does happen pretty often.
Yeah, so another big reason that you might want to extend, and this is what we get a lot of questions about, potentially you can get a raise or get a bonus for extending a contract. And there are a couple different ways that this could happen. So essentially, if you wanted to extend a contract and you wanted to get paid more, that could either come from the travel company itself, or it could come from renegotiating the contract between the travel company and the facility. So they might go to the facility and ask for more money in your pay package or in your bill rate. So and say you're making $55 an hour, the facility is paying the travel company $55 an hour. Say they go back to the facility and say, hey, our traveler is thinking about extending there, they're having a good experience, but they would like to get paid a little bit more. Is there any way that we could increase this to say $60 an hour, which might mean an additional $100 or $200 a week for you as a therapist?
Yeah, we just saw a question come through actually asking about this. If you extend your contract, are you likely to make the same or less or more? And most of the time you can actually make a little bit more, if not the same. Now, unfortunately, we have heard of rare instances where the pay does go down if it was a certain circumstance. Like, for example, with COVID, some of the facilities had to renegotiate their budgets in order to keep travelers on because of just the financial crisis and the overall staffing crisis that occurred with COVID. So there were rare circumstances where pay went down on an extension, but that is usually not
Very
the
rare.
case. Usually not the
We
case.
had this happen one time. It wasn't to do with COVID, but we were working at a rural hospital. I think they had like 6 therapists leave all at the same time. So a group of therapists kind of broke off and started their own practice. They were really desperate to get travelers in there. So they were paying us crisis rate, basically, which was a pretty high rate for our first 3 months there. Whitney and I both worked at that facility. And then once that 3 months was up, we wanted to extend. They were fine with us extending, but they were like, hey, it's not a crisis anymore. We can't pay you as much. And so that was one of the only times that pay actually decreased. But almost always you'll make a little bit more if you extend a contract.
Yep. So we'll get into talking a little bit about how you can go about negotiating the pay part, but let's talk about how the process of this might work in terms of the time frame. So if you're on a contract, say it's a typical 13-week contract, sometimes if the facility knows that they've used travelers back to back to back, and they're going to be the type of facility that is going to ask you if you might want to just stay there permanently or if you might want to stay longer, they'll probably bring this up pretty early on in the contract if they know they don't have someone lined up to interview for the permanent position. So you might know right off the bat that they want you to stay longer, and this is a really good position for you to be in because you kind of have all the cards at this point. Now, what if you, about halfway through the contract, decide, maybe I might want to stay longer, but my boss hasn't said anything about it, and I know I have seen some people come through the door that we're interviewing, and I don't really know if they're going to need me any longer. How do you go about bringing this up? Well, usually what we would do is about halfway through the contract, we would just talk to our manager at the facility and say, hey, it's about halfway through my contract. This is usually the time in my contract when I will decide what I'm going to do next. I need to decide, am I going to start looking for my next contract or what I'm going to do? So I was just wondering if you might still need me any longer than my current contract end date. This is a really good way to bring it up just to see what they say. And they might say, we probably don't because we have this new person starting, right when your contract ends, so I don't think we're going to need you. And then that lets you know, okay, extension is off the table. I need to look for my next contract. Or maybe they say, yeah, we could keep you longer. What do we need to do? And then you say, oh, good, well, then I'll go and talk to my recruiter. And after you kind of get the feel for it and decide that the manager thinks they might want you longer, then this is when you go talk to your recruiter about how this works.
Yeah, and normally the first, say, 6 to 7 weeks of your contract, you'll kind of get a feel for whether they're going to need you or not. Like, how busy are you there? Are they hiring someone else? Are they at least interviewing for your position? Those kind of things. If they're not, then chances are they're going to need you. So if you're working 40 hours a week consistently, you have a full caseload, they haven't hired anyone, chances are they're still going to need a traveler. And if they're going to need a traveler, then you can kind of get a feel for how are things going here for me? Am I doing well? Do I enjoy it here? Do they seem like they're responding well to me as a traveler? If so, then that's when you could consider, okay, maybe I want to extend this contract, stay a little longer, maybe get a raise or a bonus on my reimbursement.
And something that quite often comes up that people wonder is, do you have to extend a 13-week contract for a whole another 13 weeks? And the answer is no. Extensions are completely whatever you and the facility want to make of it. The travel therapy company and your recruiter are there just to facilitate whatever the facility wants and whatever the traveler wants. So, for example, if you think maybe it would work out in my favor if I stayed here another month, but maybe not a whole 13 weeks, or the facility, maybe they're like, well, we have, depending on the time of year, maybe their hiring is kind of based on when staffing increases, like around the time of new graduates, for example. So say they know they can hire a new graduate in May, and your current contract's supposed to end in March. Well, then maybe they only want you to extend for 6 or 7 or 8 weeks, but not a whole 13 weeks. You guys can work that out. It doesn't have to be exactly 13 weeks. Whether it's your preference or theirs, it can be shorter, it can be longer.
Yeah, and that's brings up a good point. Pretty much everything in travel therapy is negotiable. Like, pay is negotiable, start date's negotiable, contract extensions are negotiable. So almost everything is negotiable as long as it's a good fit for you, a good fit for the facility. The travel company is not going to have any problem with anything that you guys decide to do because it just means more money for them. So they're going to be happy with any kind of extension terms you can work out with the facility. And if you need them to facilitate anything like that, then they can help there as well.
Yep. So in terms of when you finally get to the point of starting to negotiate this, you know that the facility wants you there longer, your manager wants you there, you want to stay. Now you go back to the drawing board with your recruiter for negotiations, just like you did when you took your original job with them. We never encourage you to negotiate pay with the facility because quite often your manager is not the one that controls your pay at all. It's usually somebody in their HR department, their hiring department, their recruiting department. So you're negotiating with your recruiter. And we want to mention here that extensions are great for the travel company. They have to do almost no work to continue keeping you there week after week and making commission off you. So you're in a really good position to negotiate with your recruiter to get more money.
Yeah, and not only are extensions great for the travel company, extensions are great for the facility because say you left that place after 13 weeks, they have to bring in another traveler and they have to train that traveler. And usually that means some sort of ramp up period, which means that the new traveler is not going to be as productive as you on week 1 as you were on your 13th week, if that makes sense. So it's good for everyone. It's good for the traveler, the travel company, and the facility if you're able to extend your contract.
Yep. So as Jared sort of started to lay out earlier, there's 2 different places that additional money can come from into your pocket. So one of them will be just from the existing bill rate that the facility is already offering and the normal pay package. So they're going to keep paying the exact same amount to the travel company as they were for your first 13 weeks in most circumstances. But where you can actually make more money is in the beginning, when you first signed onto your contract, the travel therapy company had some upfront costs that they had to pay for you for things like your credentialing, your background check, your drug screen, those sort of things. They might have had to also reimburse you for some things in the beginning, like they had to reimburse you for your license, maybe relocation costs, like the mileage to get there. Maybe you had negotiated some other reimbursements at the beginning. So when we look at our pay, we don't just want to look at our weekly pay that we made every week for 13 weeks. We want to look at the entire pay package, which includes the reimbursements that you got at the beginning of the contract. So therefore, when you extend a contract, they need to be able to pay you those same amounts that they paid you in your pay package at the beginning, whether it was a reimbursement or those costs, those hidden costs that you didn't see that they paid for your background check and credentialing.
Yep. Real quick, we got a lot of you guys in here. I see we're getting a lot of questions. We'll go over all the questions when we get to the end of this. We'll probably answer a lot of the questions as we go anyway, so then we'll go back through and answer them. If you guys are getting value from the video, though, please like the video, leave us comments. We always appreciate it.
Yeah. So that would be your normal circumstance where the facility is not going to be paying any more money to the travel therapy company. That's called the bill rate, the amount the facility pays to the travel company. That'll probably stay the same in most circumstances. So all you're going to say when you're going back to the drawing board talking to your recruiter is, hey, can you work some of those upfront costs back into my pay for my extension, like that bonus that you gave me and some of the credentialing costs? So what this might look like is that your recruiter says, yes, at the beginning we gave you a reimbursement for your license, so I can give you a bonus of that same amount, whether it was $200, $300, or we did have some additional costs in the beginning, so maybe that could look like an additional $1 or $2 an hour worked into your hourly pay.
Yeah, and so that example I laid out in the beginning where the travel company goes back to the facility and tries to negotiate a higher rate, that is not a common thing to happen. The reason being, especially in a tough job market, let's say when you got this job there was 15 applicants and you got it, and say the bill rate is $55 an hour. Well, now you want to extend your contract and you say, well, I only want to extend it if they'll pay more. I can get an extra $200 a week. Well, the travel company cannot pay you an extra $200 a week. In reality, most contract extensions are going to be between $1 to $2 an hour, like Whitney said. So that's $40 to $80 a week. So if you want $200 extra a week, the facility is going to have to pay the travel company more. Okay, so why would they agree to pay more for your extension, $5 an hour, $10 an hour, whatever it is, if they know they had a ton of applicants for that position? Most likely they'll just say, no, we'll just get another traveler then. So it's not very often, unless you're in a position where they really like you a lot and they want you to stay, or they were just very desperate, they don't have many applicants, it's not a very desirable location or something like that, then you might be able to negotiate a higher bill rate with the facility, or the travel company will negotiate a higher bill rate. But the vast majority of the time, it's just going to come from those things that Whitney was talking about. So it's basically just reimbursing you for some of those upfront costs that are not going to have to be incurred on this extension.
Yep. So you just kind of have to know when you're in a certain situation with an extension, and no extension is going to be exactly the same. You have to know when you're in a really good position to negotiate for more money or not negotiate for more money. But Even without negotiating, you probably should still at least make a little bit more on the extension, because the recruiter, if you have a good recruiter, should be working back in those upfront costs for you on your extension without you even asking. You may just have to mention it and they'll say, oh yeah, of course. We had this money, this pot of money in the beginning, we will carry that over to the extension.
Yep. Now, so how would they include that into the extension? It can be a variety of ways. They can say that you take a week off. So I saw we got a question about that. Do you take time off? It depends. Whatever works for you and works for the facility is fine. So if you want to take a week off, the facility is okay with you taking a week off, then you can make that work. And let's say during that week off, you want to drive back to your tax home. Maybe instead of paying you more in a taxable amount or a bonus, they can reimburse you for the expenses to drive back home. And that might work out better because then it's not taxed like a bonus would be, or like an extra $1 or $2 an hour on your hourly pay would be. So that's kind of a more ideal situation, in my opinion, if you can get them to reimburse you for something that you might otherwise be paying for out of pocket. So yeah, like a drive back home, or say a CEU course that you want to do, something like that. That's a perfect way to get that extension bonus worked into the contract where you're not having to pay additional taxes on it.
Yeah, so there's some different types of ways that you can negotiate here. Now, it also depends on if the facility is totally okay with you taking time off or not. In some cases, that might be a negotiating tactic you have to use in and of itself, because maybe they don't really want to give you that time off, but you say, okay, I will extend, but the token that you're dangling there is I need this time off. So if you give me this time off, I will extend.
Yep.
Now, if they're being difficult about it, you may not be in a position to negotiate both the time off and the increase in pay, but it just depends. Quite often they'll be okay with it, just kind of like if you were a regular employee and you needed a few days off or a week off. But just know that all of this kind of goes into your negotiating factors here. Time off, additional reimbursement for something, maybe you want that CEU course paid for as part of your extension, whatever you need to come to an agreement with. But kind of goes back to, you're just going to be negotiating these things with your recruiter. You don't really negotiate them so much except for the time off request with your manager.
Yep.
So those are kind of how the negotiations go. I think that's mostly everything we needed to cover, except to answer you guys' questions that you may have. Make sure we covered everything. Yeah. So what questions do you guys have? I know a bunch of them came through in the comments, so we'll go back and read through these.
Yeah, just as a recap real quick, extensions are good for everybody, for the traveler, the travel company, the facility. Extensions are a really good thing, especially in a tough job market. If you already have a job that you like, it's always a good idea to extend that job if it's reasonable for you. When you extend, you can work in all kinds of different perks or whatever works for you and the facility, as long as they're willing to do it. Start thinking about whether you're going to extend or look for your next contract. Probably midway through your assignment is a good time. And you should expect somewhere between probably $1 and $3 an hour extra in terms of compensation, and it just depends on how that is actually structured. So that could just be an additional $2 an hour on your taxable hourly rate, or it could be a reimbursement. It just depends on how it works best for everyone, or it could just be a lump sum in a bonus form.
Yep, absolutely. And then just remember always, whenever we're talking about pay, whenever we're talking about negotiations, whether it's at the beginning of a contract or it's a contract extension, it's a good thing to have a good relationship, an open relationship with your recruiter where you're talking about these things like, where is the money coming from? And it's important for you as an informed traveler to understand where the money comes from. So if the recruiter is saying, well, the facility's not paying me any more money, how am I going to give you an extension bonus? We've had people say they get this feedback from their recruiters all the time, because they'll say, hey, Whitney and Jared, or this other resource I saw online, these other travelers I know said I should get an extension bonus on my extension. And then your recruiter pushes back and says, why would you get an extension bonus? The facility is paying us the same amount. Then you can be informed and be educated and say to them, well, what about those credentialing costs that happened up front? What about the reimbursements that happened up front? Can you give me that money back in my extension? So the more you know, the more you can have intelligent, educated conversations with your recruiter, and these open conversations. And hopefully if you have a good recruiter, they will appreciate that. They'll say, yeah, absolutely. This is exactly how it works. You nailed it.
Yeah, and new travelers make all kinds of mistakes. That's why we make these videos, so that hopefully you guys don't make the same mistakes we did. My first contract ever, I extended it and I got paid less for it. So that should not be the case.
Yeah, we've learned a lot along the way, so hopefully this will help you guys. Again, thank you so much for all of you guys that watched. We're going to go through all the comments. Again, if you got any value out of this video so far, please hit the thumbs up button. We appreciate it. If you have a friend who's a traveler that needs to hear this information, tag them in this video and let them know so that way they can learn too, so that we can, all move forward and be educated travelers and make the most money possible, hopefully.
I'm going to start at the top or the bottom?
We'll start here at the bottom. So Segal says, how does the recruiter get paid? Do they get commission on each assignment?
So every company is different on this. We've talked to a lot of companies and recruiters. Usually the most common that we've seen is it's a base salary of some sort. So maybe $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year as a base salary, and then some sort of incentive based on how many travelers they have on assignment or how many hours their travelers work in aggregate. So they'll usually get some sort of bonus based on how many travelers they have. And that makes sense because the company wants to encourage recruiters to get people placed, obviously. So, but if they're not getting anybody placed, they don't want them to make $0. So there's usually a base salary. It's kind of like most sales jobs.
Yep, so definitely some type of commission, just depending on how it's structured.
Yep.
Lisa says, did you spring forward in Mexico? Seems like you're late tonight. Yeah, we mentioned that at the beginning of the video, that this time did not change in Mexico. So we did not know that the time had changed in the US, and therefore we now have a difference in 2 hours instead of 1 hour.
Daylight savings time in Mexico is in April, apparently.
Yeah. All right, Nick says, it's a long one. I'm not gonna read that whole one because it was a response to something else. Nick says, I was able to negotiate a week off for Thanksgiving. That's awesome. Nick wants to know, have you ever canceled a contract from your end? Is that even a thing, and are there penalties?
We've never really canceled a contract. So we had one, the closest we came to canceling a contract is we extended a contract and then decided that we weren't going to go through with the extension because things changed between the time we decided to extend it and then when the extension actually started. So we didn't really cancel anything in terms of like giving notice. We just said, you know what, I don't think we're going to do this extension, and it was fine. Yeah. But yes, that is the thing. There's not penalties as long as it's for a good reason. If you're working with a good company, a good recruiter, and there's some reason that you're canceling the contract, say it's like, a personal reason, say you have a death in the family, something like that, or say, you're having issues with the manager or the facility, your recruiter is going to understand that. But if it's something like, well, I really want to go on vacation, or, well, this other job's going to pay me more and I want to start this job, those aren't good reasons. There might be penalties there. So you never want to cancel something unless it's you have a valid reason. Yeah,
absolutely. You want to remain on good terms with your recruiter, with the travel therapy company, and with the facility. So usually you need to have a really good reason to cancel a contract.
And of course, if you cancel the contract, you also want to give notice, either 2 weeks or 30 days, whatever's in the contract.
Cassandra wants to know, how frequently does an agency end your position early? If so, how do you regroup for your next placement? So we're going to actually do a different video, you guys, on this. Is actually what I had in mind for an upcoming video, was ending and canceling contracts. But it does happen occasionally, not that often, but it just really depends on the circumstance. Every contract's different. And regrouping for your next placement, hopefully you've worked in a cancellation clause that's like 30 days. So then you get 30 days to try to figure out what you're going to do for your next placement.
It really depends. And some people have bad luck with this, honestly. I don't know why. We've been pretty fortunate. I've never had a contract ended early. Whitney's only had one ended early, and they gave her 30 days notice and everything turned out fine. So, but some travelers have worse luck than that.
Yeah. Nick Foy says, here's a challenge. I'm going to try and convince the director at my current position to hire me on full-time, but I want to get pay similar to travel pay in outpatient. The location I'm in right now is not a very desirable place, so I may have a chance.
Yeah, so that's a really great thing about working in rural areas or places that are not drawing in a ton of therapy talent, I would say, is you have a lot of negotiating power there, whether that's with a travel contract or with a permanent position. And if they know that they're going to have to hire continuous travelers, they might be willing to pay you a lot more money just to have some consistency, especially in an outpatient clinic. Mm-hmm. A lot of outpatient clinics, especially in rural areas, have a lot of repeat patients. And those patients really enjoy seeing the same therapist and not a new traveler every time. So that could be something that they value, and they might pay you pretty similar to what they would pay a traveler just to have someone there consistently.
Yeah, and they're having to pay a premium basically to have a traveler there because they have to pay the travel therapy company quite a big bill rate so that they can get their commission and take out their fees and everything and then pay you what you're making. The only difference there is that your pay is going to be all taxed now as a permanent therapist instead of someone who's getting the tax-free stipends. So it may make it a little more difficult for them to pay you a gross amount that's going to make your bottom line what you want it to be, but hopefully you can get somewhere pretty high up there in your negotiations.
Yeah, good luck with it.
Megan wants to know, could you negotiate a break between the extension and the end of the contract? Absolutely. We talked about that. Let's see if we got any other questions here. I think we had a few. Cassandra says, can you list the Mentor website again? Yes, so our website is called Travel Therapy Mentor, traveltherapymentor.com. And if you guys are interested in learning about our new travel therapy course, when you go to traveltherapymentor.com, just click Travel Therapy Course at the top, or I think it's traveltherapymentor.com/course. And it'll lay out all the information that our new course has to offer. And you can click through there to go to the website. To see the purchase price and see all the details on what is included. Again, the course includes 12 hours of video lessons, links to additional resources, downloadable guides and checklists that help you through A to Z and getting started with travel therapy. It also includes a one-on-one mentorship call with us. It also includes a private Facebook group for ongoing mentorship. We did recently run a sale on our course, and that just ended. So if you missed that, we're not running a sale on it right now, but we might potentially run another sale sometime later this year, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, check it out on our website. Okay.
Brian says, I'm sure you guys are going to cover this later, but is it normal for a facility to offer less for an extension or the same? Yeah, we covered that. So you should almost never get paid less unless the initial bill rate was really high, you were getting paid an insane amount. So, for some of these COVID contracts, people are making $3,000 a week. And then maybe the COVID rush dies down and they don't need, it's not a crisis anymore. And maybe they only pay you $1,800. That might be a situation where your extension might actually get paid less, but that's pretty rare.
Nick Foy says, I extended this contract for a whole year. Yeah, Jared did almost a year at one place. He did about over 9 months. So he extended 13 weeks and then again and then again. And then a lot of other contracts we've extended to like 5 to 6 months before, but never a whole year. And that's an important note we should mention too is you shouldn't be extending contracts beyond a year, beyond 365 days, because this is going to impact your tax home rules per the IRS. So you shouldn't stay in one location as a traveler for longer than 365 days.
Yeah, and the general rule of thumb there is some travel companies will try to tell you all kinds of things because, like we talked about, they're incentivized to get travelers to accept assignments. So they might tell you, oh, well, you can stay a year and then leave for a week and then come back and stay another year. That's not really the case. So the general rule of thumb is probably don't stay more than 12 months in a 24-month period. So just keep that in mind, and that's in the same metro area.
Yeah, and if you guys want to learn more about the tax home rules in regards to extensions, we would recommend the website traveltax.com. Joe Smith is the owner at TravelTax. He's an expert in this area. He's worked with traveling healthcare professionals for decades, and he can more thoroughly take you through the IRS rules and the tax home rules. Cassandra says, thank you for this resource. You're welcome, Cassandra. Thank you for joining. Hey, Aaron. All right. We'll see if there's any more questions. I think that's all the questions, unless you guys have any others. Let's see, scroll back down, see if there's anything else. Terrence says, I extended for up to a year multiple times as a traveler.
Yeah, if you have a good assignment and you can get extension bonuses and not have to switch places and not have the opportunity costs for taking time off, then extending for a year is a really, really good way to make a lot of money.
Yeah, it totally just depends on your priorities. Again, if you find a place that you really like and it's consistent money, it's more like a permanent job. It's almost a whole year, but you're getting paid way better than if you were there as a permanent therapist. So depending on your goals and your priorities, that can be a really good thing where you can make good money but have more consistency and cut out some of those negatives of traveling around a lot. Unless you just want to see the most places possible, and we get that too. Okay. Oh, we do have a couple more comments here. Okay, Brian says, do you see traveling contracts continuing to grow and therefore more extensions as COVID regresses?
Yeah. So we'll probably do another travel market update in maybe a few weeks, probably for April. But yeah, the market has continued to improve. We didn't have the big lull kind of in January, February like normal. So things have just gradually continued to get better. We're seeing more and more people get placed. So it's definitely getting better.
Yeah.
He said, it just seems like contracts are thin these days. Yeah, it's not back to 100% for sure, but it is improving.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, Brian, if I recall, that you are a newer graduate, and it's definitely still really hard for newer grads right now. It's definitely still very competitive. He said specifically for outpatient. Outpatient has been impacted the most. Outpatient jobs are extremely slim right now.
Yeah.
Although we did just recently see an uptick. There's one travel therapy company that we work with that staffs a lot of outpatient on the East Coast. And they've had a lot of outpatient jobs in Maryland, Virginia, Georgia,
North Carolina.
a couple in North Carolina, but mostly Maryland, Virginia, and Georgia. We've seen a lot of outpatient lately, so if anybody's interested in those, let us know. We can get you connected. But I would say in general, outpatient is still really hard to come by. There was a lot of layoffs, even in permanent therapists, this past year with outpatient, and it really hasn't rebounded yet. So if you're a primarily outpatient therapist, it's definitely harder to find contracts right now.
Yeah, and outpatient jobs, since they are, I guess, usually pretty high demand and not as many right now, we're trying to, on our hot job list on the website, if you go to traveltherapymentor.com, at the top there's a hot job section. We're trying to put any outpatient ortho jobs that we get on there, just because we know there's a lot of people looking.
Yeah, so let us know if you guys are interested in that and check out our list. George says, out of the 24 contracts that I've done, only 2 were cut short by getting a 30-day notice. That's really good, George, especially, George, because you're a PTA. We've actually heard more often PTAs and COTAs getting their contracts canceled, and we think that might be because there's just not as high of a demand for PTAs and COTAs. Like, there's more volume of PTAs and COTAs searching for permanent jobs than there are jobs. Whereas it's the opposite. There's a lot of places, especially rural places, where they don't have any physical therapy doctorate programs or occupational therapy or speech therapy programs nearby. So they're finding it difficult to get PTs, OTs, and SLPs to come to their small town. Whereas PTAs and COTAs are quite often community college locations, and they might have a higher volume of clinicians available looking for work in that area. So it's a little bit more common for assistants to get their travel contracts canceled because they don't have as much trouble finding perm assistants to take those jobs.
George said he's also done 39 weeks, Virginia Home Health, extending twice. Yeah, I think extensions make a lot of sense for the most part.
Yeah. All right. Nick says, I know all about those Georgia outpatient jobs. Yeah, Nick, you definitely have the scoop on those. We never ended up working in Georgia. We had our applications filled out and we never ended up going there. But definitely could be a good opportunity for somebody. All right, I think that's all the questions. But if you guys have questions later, if you're watching this on the replay, feel free to type them in the comments. We will go back and answer the questions later. If you're listening later on the replay, type #replay. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. If you like to listen later on our podcast, you can find our podcast anywhere that you stream podcasts, Apple, Spotify, what's the one that you like called?
Overcast.
You can subscribe to us on podcast format. If you have any questions, feel free to send us a message on Facebook, Instagram, or through our website at traveltherapymentor.com. All right, have a great night, guys.
Yep, take care.